Alright, so I have been stripping and resurfacing all of my metal parts, which I find to be necessary for a 24-year-old bike, 24-year-old paint job, 24 years of use and abuse. I've already resurfaced this aluminum grab bar, which was in quite bad condition. Now for me, the best tools to use for stripping and resurfacing of metal pieces are your flap wheels. This is a very forgiving tool which finds the high spots and grinds them down to make everything smooth. Now you do not want to use too heavy a grit. I have on my angle grinder here, I have a 120 grit. And on my Dremel, this flap wheel is a 100 grit, which is fine to have a coarser grit for the Dremel because this has controllable speeds. So I can use a slower speed and have a lot more control for getting into the nooks and crannies. Now if you're not careful with the flap wheel, you can cause more harm than good. When using it, you want to make sure that you stay as flat to the surface as possible, or at a slight angle. But if you start working into a metal like this, you're going to end up just gouging it, causing a lot of problems. Same with your Dremel flap wheel. As flat as possible, start working at it like that and you're just going to be cutting into the metal. Now if your metal pieces are fine, then go ahead and just use a regular paint stripper or sandblast. I recommend sandblast. But if you have pieces that have been knocked around a bit over the decades, for me it is best to just go ahead, take a flap wheel, remove the paint and resurface at the same time. So let's get to that, shall we? Now make sure when using a flap wheel not to apply too much pressure, because these flap wheels will work on their own. And if you can see there, that is what it does, just smoothing the metal out, taking out all of those little nicks and scratches that have accumulated over the decades. Okay, so now that I have removed most of the paint and taken care of most of the major surface issues with the flap disc, I want to go in with this less aggressive flap wheel on a lower speed just to clean up what is left of the paint and polish out all of the little scratches left by the flap disc. And that is done. That looks lovely. Okay, now you can see here on the before, on this rear axe or adjuster cap, you can see all of the seams from the stamping process and all the rough surface and the little nicks and such acquired over the years. And this is the resurfaced part. All of those seams ground away, all of the decades of abuse gone. So that is why we resurface, because a judge in a show will notice the difference. Well, I have finished mechanically stripping and resurfacing all of these metal parts, which is something I suggest you not do unless you fancy straitjackets and rubber rooms. However, these are the pains one must go through when spraying a custom show quality paint job. Now what you have to understand is that these parts do not come out of the factory flawless. They have pitting, seams, sloppy welds and other imperfections that need to be smoothed out. Now I did not grind down any welds. You never ever want to grind down someone else's welds. You have no idea how good or bad they might be. But I did go over and smooth out a lot of the really sloppy welds just to make them look better. Now I'm not going to tell you how long just these little parts here have taken me. Still have other parts in the frame to do. But just to give you an idea, I have about 8 hours into the swing arm alone. And that was one of the easier jobs. So, all of these parts are done and ready for primer. Now I've already hit them with the degreaser and the tack rag, just like with the plastic parts. However, With the metal parts, I'm using an epoxy sealer primer as opposed to the resurfacing primer that I used on the plastic parts. You always want to make sure to seal your metal parts to protect them from rust. So let's get spraying, shall we?